Contingency log number 91. Codename, Son of a Patriot. For as long as war has existed, there was a concept that many governments have sought to achieve. More than just a weapon to surpass all which came before it. Not one crafted from cold hard steel, but one forged with flesh and blood, raised for a single purpose. In essence, the perfect soldier, one who can be pointed in the direction of any enemy and destroy them. This can come in many different forms. I am sure many of you are perfectly familiar with the concept of a super soldier, or perhaps the countless of super-powered heroes and villains who were given their powers through experimentation. But when it comes to David, his origins were a bit different. His birth came in the form of a cloning project, one which took the genetic code of John, or Big Boss, as he would later be known as, and implanted into a human woman by the name of Eva. Dave was created with the main goal of killing his own father, for reasons I'll go over when I eventually make my contingency for him as well. Just know that David, or Solid Snake, as he would eventually be called, would eventually achieve that goal. At least he believed he did. But Snake has achieved much more than that in his time, the training he'd received having allowed him to survive against encounters which would have killed your average soldier. Most of his achievements would occur within an Alaskan base known as Shadow Moses. Putting his stealth skills to the test, Snake would venture deep into the base, avoiding cameras and the sight of the near-endless number of guards. As well as collecting a variety of weapons he would find along the way, Snake would not only uncover secrets that had been kept from him, but also encounter opposition of the likes he'd never seen before. Faced against some of the most skilled marksmen the world can offer, Snake was able to prove that he could not only stand on a level playing field with them, but that he was more than their superior, able to defeat Revolver Ocelot, a man who could not only perfectly ricochet his bullets to hit his targets, able to do so while in a confined space, but one that is also set up to explode should even a single stray bullet hit the wrong location. All while relishing the battle with a sense of nostalgia I'll get into someday. Just know that this man and Snake have a history going further back before even David's own birth. Snake would also outmatch Sniper Wolf, a sharpshooter trained by Big Boss himself. Not only was he capable of doing this at her own game, using a rifle of which he had only just obtained, but also doing so in an environment of which Sniper Wolf has incredible proficiency in, having managed to do this not just once, but twice in a short amount of time. While I am opposed to the use of firearms, I do have to admit that his skills with them are rather impressive, which is a necessity, as not everything Snake was up against would just be another human. Snake would also manage to defeat a tank with little more than the use of simple hand grenades, not just being able to dodge the machine gun fire from atop of it, but also avoiding fire from the tank's main cannon. That said, Snake does seem durable enough to handle being hit at least a few times before succumbing to his wounds, on top of being capable of recovering from his injuries rather quickly even in the middle of battle. And he wouldn't just be able to handle a ground-based war machine, but he'd even manage to fight off a helicopter, one which was equipped with missile launchers, and yet Snake had not only managed to avoid these as well, but eventually managed to shoot it down. But even if you were to remove his weapons, Snake is more than capable of handling an opponent with just close quarters combat, capable of defeating Gray Fox, a cybernetically enhanced soldier with reaction speed fast enough to deflect submachine gun fire with just a sword. Even when cloaked, Snake was capable of pinpointing his location, and eventually managed to defeat him as well. And most impressively, Snake managed to defeat someone whose abilities stemmed from more mystical means. A man going by the name of Psycho Mantis. His abilities not only allowed him to move objects with his mind, but he was also capable of controlling the mind of others, reading their thoughts to predict someone's next movements and avoid them. But Snake seemed to be able to resist Mantis' abilities, preventing him from reading his thoughts, something he'd never encountered before, leaving Mantis confused and afraid. I do have to wonder how he'd accomplished this, however. It was almost as though he'd changed the slots of his own mind, It would indeed be a great skill to have, given what I've been up against. But that's something I'll save for later. In the end, all these skills of Snake's would eventually lead him to defeat Metal Gear Rex, a massive machine which was equipped with a railgun, one which was designed to fire nuclear warheads without being detected. I doubt I need to go into detail over how dangerous something like that is, and to imagine that Snake was able to defeat this, with a little help, sure, but to be able to stand against such a machine at all is almost impossible to imagine a normal man accomplish. Everything he'd done here was an amazing accomplishment, not just in the enemies he'd defeated, but also managing to stop what could have shifted the advent of war to a point of no return. But this would not be the last of his accomplishments, as only a few years later he would need to take up another mission, one which would be his last, not just because he would retire, but because the cloning process which created him had one glaring flaw, which was that in time, Snake would see himself age rapidly, becoming an old man in less than a decade after the events of Shadow Moses. And yet, he would push on, facing enemies stronger than before, in a war which had changed so much in so little time. And yet, for as much as things had changed, Snake would find them all too familiar, his opponents at times being not mirrors of past foes, but upgraded versions of them, stronger, faster, more terrifying than before. And yet Snake faced them all, coming out the victor in every clash, all while his body continued to fail him, almost begging him to rest. But he wouldn't allow it, as he still had a mission to finish. Finally putting an end to Liquid Snake, his twin, or at least someone who had forced to think he was. In the end, he'd finally been allowed to rest, for however long he had left. The difficulty in combating Snake can vary. As stated, he is highly skilled in stealth and espionage. In a sense, placing both of us in our own element would even the playing field, but his ability to hold on to a large number of weapons in a sort of hammer space will prove difficult to handle, as there's no telling what weapon he will use at any given moment. And unfortunately, hoping Snake will at some point run out of ammunition does not seem like a possibility. I'm no stranger to gunfire. I've spent a considerable amount of my life dodging it from not just random gunmen, but also some of the most well-trained marksmen my world has to offer. However, none has had the level of firepower that Snake has, not all at once at least. I could attempt to disarm him, but I have my doubts that Snake would fall for the same tricks more than once. And while I'd need to disarm him several times if I wished to render him unarmed, he would only need one clean shot of me to end it all. But those weapons may prove to be a bigger hindrance on him than he believes. This is due to something I'd created in a previous contingency, a massive magnet I'd created in hopes to render Wolverine immobile. I believe that with all the metal of Snake's weaponry would cause the same effect. My hope is that, should he be left with little to no other options, Snake will willingly disarm himself so that he may continue fighting. After that, I plan to move the battle closer, challenging Snake to hand-to-hand combat. I could likely defeat him if I continued to fight from the shadows, using my gadgets while keeping him at a distance. But for some reason, I find no glory in that. I want to face him on equal terms, and show him whose training is superior. If you also have a character you wish for me to cover, or just want to support this channel, I'll have a link to my Ko-fi page. There will also be a Google Doc with the list of characters who have ever been done or already commissioned by others.